Christy's little brother Vince was 21 years old when his sister was murdered. He says he thought the police department would solve the case within weeks. The fact that it's 19 years later, he says, is frustrating.
In the chill of December 1992, just days before Christmas, the unimaginable happened. Christy Mirack, a beloved 6th grade teacher, was brutally murdered while heading to her school. The unsettling mystery of her murder would echo through the years and send waves of grief and unease, leaving a profound question. Who had brought this terror into their lives? It would take decades and numerous strides forward in DNA technology before Christy's grieving loved ones would finally unravel the haunting truth. Welcome to the Crimeful Corner. I'm Eli, and in today's video, we're uncovering the story of Christy Mirack and the decades-long journey to justice that followed her tragic demise. On December 21st, 1992, Christy Mirack didn't show up to work at 8:45 a.m. The principal of the school where she taught 6th grade became concerned. He called her home and drove to her house to check on her when there was no answer. As the principal pulled up outside Christy's apartment building, he could see her front door partially open. The principal repeatedly rang the doorbell, yelled Christy's name, and announced he was there before deciding to enter her apartment. As the principal entered Christy's home, he was greeted by a sight that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Upon opening the door, the principal was shocked to see the aftermath of a gruesome crime, blood and destruction, the odor of fear and violence, and the stillness of the home. It was a scene he would never forget. Years of intensive therapy followed, and his life was forever changed. After stumbling out of Christy's apartment, the principal pounded on her neighbors' doors, screaming for help. Someone eventually let the man in and called 911. Within minutes, ambulances and police cars were outside Christy's apartment. Emergency responders found a woman's body in the living room with significant injuries to her face and neck. Based on what investigators observed, the woman appeared to have been sexually assaulted. She was nude from the waist down, her shirt and jacket pushed up to reveal her chest. An apparent struggle occurred inside Christy's apartment. Scuff marks were on the floor near the front door. After examining the crime scene, investigators found male DNA near Christy's body on the carpet and cut it out. The carpet remnant was preserved for evidence testing in hopes that it would provide a lead to a suspect. As investigators processed the crime scene the morning Christy died, officers had the difficult task of notifying her family. However, when the officers called Christy's mother and brother, who lived 2 hours away, they informed them she had died from an accident, and they didn't want them to drive knowing the horrible truth. But when Christy's family learned the shocking truth about her death, they were devastated, and Christy's mother was utterly shattered. Christy Mirack was the middle sister and made everyone smile and laugh. Her outgoing personality and quick wit enabled her to light up a room with her presence. As a natural leader, Christy always had kind words and warm hugs to share. Since Christy was a young girl, she dreamed of becoming a teacher. After working hard throughout her studies, Christy finally achieved her dream by graduating from Millersville University with a degree in education. Christy loved being a teacher, and her students loved her in return. Everything in Christy's life had been going well, making her brutal murder so shocking. Her murder sent shockwaves through Lancaster, as everyone was in disbelief that someone would take such a kind and respected teacher away from the world. At the crime scene, investigators canvassed Christy's apartment complex and found that one of the residents had information to share. She said that at 7:15 a.m., she saw a white vehicle parked in the overflow parking lot across from Christy's apartment. Driving the car was a Caucasian man with long dark hair. After exiting his vehicle, he crossed the street and headed towards Christy's apartment. A few moments later, the resident heard a scream coming from the direction of Christy's apartment, but she wasn't sure if it was Christy. By providing a description of the man she had seen, she helped investigators create a composite image. Once the investigators had completed the sketch, they released it to the public along with the information regarding the white car, hoping it would provide useful information in solving Christy's murder. Nevertheless, when investigators followed up on all the leads they received, they weren't fruitful. Christy's roommate informed investigators that she had left the apartment that morning at 7 a.m. and Christy typically left about a half hour after her. It shocked the investigators that Christy had been murdered in broad daylight. They were stunned by the brazenness of her killer and knew this person was dangerous and needed to be stopped. After Christy's murder, a man showed up at the elementary school where she worked, asking to see her. The school's employees were confused as Christy had been found dead the day before. Who was this person, and why did he not know she was murdered? Concerned, the employee called 911. And officers responded and asked the man who he was. He went by the nickname Dagger, and he was Christy's ex-boyfriend. Dagger told investigators that he was 20 years older than Christy, and the two had met a few years earlier at a bar. Despite their age difference, Dagger and Christy liked one another. The only problem with Dagger and Christy's relationship was that he was married. Christy kept her relationship with Dagger hidden from her family and friends. Her private life was kept a secret. Although Christy was comfortable dating Dagger despite his marriage, her feelings changed as time passed. As Christy's friends started getting married and having children, she realized that was something she wanted in life but couldn't have with Dagger. Dagger explained to the investigators that Christy had ended their relationship the Saturday before her murder. His attempts to contact Christy had been unsuccessful, which was why he showed up at her school that day. Initially, investigators were unsure about Dagger's story. They believed it was suspicious. Investigators asked Dagger where he was on the day Christy was killed, and he said he was in Virginia. He explained that he had recently moved to Virginia to be with his wife. On December 21st, Dagger said he was changing the address on his license and registering his vehicle at the Department of Motor Vehicles. The Virginia DMV confirmed Dagger's story after investigators contacted them. After Christy's death, the pathologist conducted an autopsy and determined she had a fractured jaw and ligature marks around her neck. Christy's manner of death was deemed a homicide, with strangulation as the cause, but not before her killer brutally beat her. The pathologist collected male DNA from Christy's body and sent the samples to the state crime lab for testing. Once the technicians obtained a DNA profile, investigators could upload it to CODIS. In 1992, when Christy was murdered, CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, was in its infancy. Only 12 states participated in it, and only a limited number of DNA samples were available from convicted felons. However, investigators uploaded Christy's murderer's DNA to the database, but no matches were found. On December 23rd, investigators questioned the principal of the school where Christy worked. Since he found Christy dead, they were interested in what he had to say. The principal thought the investigators would ask him questions about the crime scene or if Christy had been acting strangely at work. However, he was stunned when they questioned him about his own actions. They asked him if Christy attracted him sexually or if they were dating secretly. He was upset that the investigators had attempted to defame Christy's memory in that way and said such allegations were absurd. After submitting a polygraph and providing a DNA sample, Christy's boss was cleared of any involvement in her murder. Christy Mirack was buried on the day after Christmas by her family. Mourners packed the church. The emotion in the room was palpable. People were crying and embracing each other, sharing memories of Christy and expressing their disbelief that such a tragedy could happen to someone so young and full of life. With no leads to follow in Christy's murder, the case quickly turned cold.
I believe someone out there is going to drive by that eventually one day and say, you know what, I want to talk.
Mirack was a teacher at the old Roarstown Elementary School, and Nell says her absence here is sad.
She wanted to make a difference in the classroom, and knowing 19 years later, she still could be teaching today, making a difference in the community.
Mirack's brother Vince remembers fondly his caring sister and says each Christmas, losing her does not get easier. They do have DNA evidence in this case. So far, though, they've only used that to rule people out. And Kim and Ron, investigators do continue to get tips about this case. 19 years later, they're hoping one of them will flesh out and they'll help find the killer.
In March 2017, investigators working on Christy's cold case sent DNA samples to Parabon for prediction of his characteristics. The suspect's profile was released and adapted to show how he might have looked through time. However, investigators were not able to get the lead they needed. In April 2018, Christy's investigation changed forever when Joseph James D'Angelo was identified as the Golden State Killer through genetic genealogy. Christy's brother heard about the method used to solve the case and thought it was innovative. After contacting the investigator on Christy's case, he asked if they could use genetic genealogy on the DNA obtained from the crime scene. A few days later, the investigator received an email from Parabon Labs offering their services to help solve cold cases. Parabon already had the suspect's DNA on file since they made a phenotyped profile the year before, so that they could start immediately. Genetic genealogist C.C. Moore uploaded the suspect's DNA to GEDmatch, a public DNA database to find their relatives. After obtaining a list of relatives, C.C. narrowed the list until the right person appeared at the right time and place to murder Christy. She eventually found the name of the person she believed was responsible for the death of Christy Mirack 26 years ago. His name was Raymond Rowe. Raymond Rowe had lived in Lancaster for 26 years. After becoming a small-town celebrity known as DJ Freeze, he built a successful career as a wedding musician. He had a clean criminal record with no previous convictions or felonies, which was why CODIS couldn't find him. While investigators tried to find a connection between Raymond Rowe and Christy, they simply could not. Christy may have attended a club he was DJing, or he might have seen her while running errands one day. It could have happened anywhere. The investigators knew only that Raymond Rowe had grown fixated on Christy, and on December 21st acted on his feelings, regardless of whether she agreed. Despite Raymond Rowe's strong resemblance to the phenotyped profile from Parabon, investigators needed more convincing evidence to obtain an arrest warrant. They had a genetic match, but it was only a lead, and they needed to compare Raymond Rowe's DNA directly with the suspects. A Pennsylvania state trooper followed Raymond to an event where he worked as a DJ and later retrieved chewing gum from him in a water bottle Raymond tossed away. After those items were secured, they were sent to the state crime lab for testing, and the results confirmed Raymond Rowe's assault and murder of Christy Mirack in 1992.
It could have been anywhere in the country, could have been anywhere in the world, but they come back to a guy who lived within 4 miles of where she was murdered.
But then investigators needed a DNA sample from Rowe himself to compare to the crime scene from all those years ago. They found out that he was DJing at, of all places, this elementary school. And when he left, they collected one of his discarded water bottles and a wad of gum.
The investigators on Christy's cold case held a press conference on June 25th, 2018, in which they announced that Raymond Rowe had been arrested. Raymond Rowe denied any involvement in Christy's murder when investigators interviewed him. He said he didn't know who she was. To avoid the death penalty, Raymond Rowe pleaded guilty in January 2019. Besides a life sentence with no parole, he also received an additional 60 years in prison for sexually assaulting Christy. Christy's friends and family miss her terribly. In 2002, her mother passed away from cancer without ever seeing her daughter receive justice. In honor of Christy, her loved ones always strive to remember how she taught them to live in the moment and not worry too much about the future, as everything always works out in the end. Her brother misses Christy's smile and wishes he could turn back the clocks and continue their lives the way they should have. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, I have a playlist here of some crazy stories that I would love to share with you. So if you have some more time to spare, go check that out. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.